And I calmly looked down and said, if I'm up here and my body's down there and he's calling code blue, I think I just died. And right when I said that, I immediately started saying, please, I need to go back. If I leave my children in this way, they'll be abused and they won't grow up to be the good human beings that they're capable of being. I need to go back to protect them.
Welcome to Living God's Light, a podcast to help you strengthen your spirituality and your connection with God. We are so happy to have you as a part of the Living God's Light family.
So I want to know, Vinney, how you got to know Barbara in the first place.
Well, right when we were publishing our book, it was only a few weeks before the book was coming out. I had somebody say, "Are you going to go to IANDS?" And I was like, who's IANDS? And they explained, that's the International Association of Near-Death Studies. They're in Salt Lake that year. And I was like, I didn't know anything about that. So I called up. I started talking with people there. Lynn started talking with people there. We got it arranged so that we could have a table. We could have kind of our own little space there.
Yeah, we missed so many deadlines.
And what's neat, though, is over the years, I had been following a lot of these people who had shared their accounts. And so I had become friends with some of them.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went there already looking for friends that I had. And what I found was what I call my IANDS mom, which is Barbara, which me and Jeff were both talking that, Jeff Olson, that we both feel that you're the IANDS mom for a lot of us. So it was really neat. We met you and Vic right away. And, Victor, her husband, he's a bit of a tall gentleman.
7
and he
foot.
stands out in the crowd. Yeah. So
Wow.
He was the tallest guy at IANDS that year. and the rest is history. Just, we really kind of hit it off and became instant friends, borderline spiritual family right away, huh?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I call it adopted by love. Yeah.
Yes.
And you guys and your family, your kids and Andrea, they're all my family too. So yeah, I love it that you guys are so sweet and so kind and generous and just absolutely beautiful people. I couldn't ever let you guys go. So don't even think that I will.
That's so special. Barbara, how long have you been involved with IANDS then?
Since 2009,
Okay.
I was invited by Dr. Jeffrey Long, who runs the Near Death Experience Research Foundation, NDERF, and he has a website that has over like 5,000 near-death experiences, all written up by the people who had them. And I was looking online and I found him first, and he was the one who invited me to my first IANDS conference. And that was the life-changing moment for me because I hadn't talked about my NDE anywhere in town, anywhere with anyone other than my husband. And I ended up meeting 50 near-death experiencers at that first conference, and we all sat in this big circle. They had it planned, and we each got to talk about our near-death experience. And then that opened me up to talking about it outside of that experience. And so ended up going to every conference that I could. And this year is going to be in Chicago at the end of August, and it's always over Labor Day weekend. And so I'll be there. Vinney, you're going to be there?
Yes.
Yes,
at least that's the plan for now.
Okay,
yeah,
good.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Good. So that'll be super. And so it's really wonderful to get to go there. It feels like an NDE family, and everybody's really kind and considerate towards everyone. And it's just really special. So beautiful event.
So I want to jump into the question right away. I know this is like way early from what we usually try to do, but something struck me. The number of times I've talked to somebody or heard from somebody who had a near-death experience who is reluctant to share it. But those of us who haven't had one, we're like, tell me more. So,
Yeah.
and I just wondered about that. Is that universal reluctance because the experience is just so deep and so connected and so unlike anything else that it's like nobody will understand, and there's no way to explain it, and everybody's going to think I'm crazy because this experience was just untranslatable. I mean, is that close?
Exactly, Vinney, don't you think? That's
Yeah,
the
my
same.
my
Yeah.
first hurdle was it was so special I didn't know how to communicate it right because I would start to try and I would just start weeping every time.
yeah. And with me, the experience, I was worried that people would judge me because of the experience and think I was crazy. And I was 31 years old when it happened, and I didn't have a support system at the time. So the person that I had was married to was very abusive. And when I told him what happened during the NDE the next morning after it happened, because I was in the hospital when it occurred, he said, "Oh, that couldn't have happened. You probably hallucinated that." And I knew that I hadn't. And I knew I'd never done drugs and alcohol, and I was clean sheet. And so I knew that it wasn't anything that I could have made up or anything. And I didn't know what to expect of it. I didn't know anything about them. So it was really something where I feel that God, the other side, planted a whole bunch of things in my life to build me up so that I would talk about it. And I really see how that happened a lot. And so finally, coming out in 2009, because my NDE happened in 1987. So it was, yeah. And then I ended up finding out that later on, when I was 55 years old, I found out that I'd had an earlier experience with death that my older brother disclosed to me, and I had died when I was 18 months old. So all of the after effects that PMA Chatwater, one of the researchers, talks about, and it's on the IANDS.org website. I had them all the way through my childhood, and I didn't know why. So it was pretty hard to be a different kid and not know why you were different. So I've now acclimated to everything, and I am totally an NDEer, but it took a long time to get there. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Well, I think this is a good segue to just, hear your story, Barbara. What happened and like what led up to your NDE, and we'd love to hear the full scope of the story.
Well, as I said, I was 31. I had moved from Salem, Oregon, where I grew up, down to Santa Barbara, California, where I live now, because a person had met me up in Oregon and had dated me and asked me to move down to Santa Barbara and get married. And I had been married previously and had a husband who just didn't want to work. And I was really wanting to be a good upstanding citizen and work really hard and be a good person in life. And so he just wasn't ready for marriage when we got married. And so I had a child with him, and I had full custody of the son. And so I moved down to Santa Barbara, not knowing that this second person that I married was abusive in many, many ways. And so once I got down here away from my family and all my support system, I started seeing his anger issues surfacing more and more and more. And it was control and manipulation and anger and physical abuse and mental abuse. It was everything. And I was so scared. And I didn't want to tell anyone that I was in that situation, because everybody in my family thought, "Oh, she got to move to Santa Barbara, and isn't she lucky? And she married that nice guy." And I didn't want to break that picture. So I kept it to myself, and I tried really hard to meet all of his needs and demands. And I ended up asking him to go to a marriage family therapist, asking him to go to a pastor of a church, trying to get him help, and nothing worked. So he ended up hurting me really badly by rupturing a disc in my back. And I was at the hospital the night before they were going to do surgery on it, a laminectomy, discectomy. And they wanted to see if the disc, when it blew out, had fractured or imploded my spinal cord, because I could no longer walk. And they were very concerned that the spinal cord was involved. So they were doing this myelogram where they inject iodine dye into your spinal cord, and they had me laying on an x-ray table. And they told me, if you have to hold very still, because if you move at all, you could have headaches for months afterwards. And I knew that would be a problem as well. So I was laying on the x-ray table, and the two x-ray techs were there, the neurosurgeon and the orthopedic surgeon that were doing surgery the next day. I guess because it was, like 4 or 5 o'clock in the evening, that maybe they weren't going to get the results before 7 a.m. the next morning when they were doing the surgery. So they were there seeing it in live and in action. And there was also a nurse. And the two x-ray techs started, one was in front of a monitor and one was right by the table where I was. The two doctors were behind him, kind of leaning against a wall. And then the nurse was over at a table by the door, probably doing paperwork or something. And the x-ray tech started pushing the button on the table to lift my head and lower my feet. But unfortunately, he pushed the wrong button. And I honestly must say, after considering this for years, that I think that was planned by God, the other side, to change the situation that I was in my life. Because as he started lowering my head, the iodine dye that they just injected into my spinal cord started flowing into my brain. And it made me feel like really strange, like, what's going on? What's happening? I feel like I'm going to faint. And I didn't want to say anything because the two x-ray techs were talking to each other. And so I was laying there really disturbed. And within a minute and a half, I had my eyes rolling to the back of my head, and I couldn't control my breathing. I started hyperventilating. And that's what caused them to hear me. And then the x-ray tech with his finger on the button leaned over the table and looked at my face and saw that my eyes were rolling back in my head, and I was trying to bring them forward and really struggling, and I was hyperventilating. And he leaned back to see where his thumb was. And when he did that, he made this face like, and so right at that point, that was the last thing I saw. I shut my eyes, and the next second I opened my eyes, or at least my vision was improved, and I was looking down from the ceiling. And I was looking straight down, as if I was up on the ceiling, like as if I had a body. It felt like there was a barrier behind my head, but I was just up there, my soul. And I immediately calmly felt absolutely wrapped in love, absolutely like a warm blanket had been put around me. Everything was okay. And I calmly looked down and said, if I'm up here and my body's down there and he's calling code blue, I think I just died. And right when I said that, I felt this presence that was right to my left, on my left shoulder area. And it felt like what God would feel like. And it felt very eternal, very loving, very accepting, just like I'd been connected to him way before this life on earth. And I immediately started calmly saying to him, as I was watching what was happening down below, I immediately started saying, please, I need to go back. If I leave my children, because I had a baby, and she was only 5 months old. So now I had an 8-year-old son and a 5-month-old daughter. And I said, if I leave my children in this way, they'll be abused, and they won't grow up to be the good human beings that they're capable of being. I need to go back to protect them. Please let me go back. And so I said that as they were doing all sorts of stuff down below. I watched them bring in oxygen cart, and initially the two x-ray techs were doing CPR on me with the chest compressions and blowing in my mouth. And then the oxygen cart got put on the mask got put on my face, so they stopped blowing in my mouth, and they just switched off every couple minutes doing chest compressions. And the nurse over at the table was yelling into the phone that she wanted a defib unit brought in, stat. And then this man came in and he had a box and he put it on this shelf that was next to the table that I was laying on, and he started peeling off these little white things and putting them on my chest, and I didn't know what they were, like stickers. And I actually stopped talking to God, the being, and I said, I understand what everybody else is doing, but I don't understand what is he doing. And when I said that, my consciousness was moved down right in front of that box, maybe about 12 inches away from it. And I watched as that man's hand reached between the box and my consciousness, and he reached over on the side of the box and flicked a toggle switch, which caused the green area at the top of the box to have a little light up in it. And it started going straight across in a straight line and making this monotone sound, beep. I didn't know what it was. I had never seen a heart monitor. I've never been a TV person, and I just didn't know what it was. And so I watched it go all the way across the screen, the little light, and then I watched it go across the second time, and I was still confused. What is this? And the third time it started to go across, all of a sudden, somehow I knew, oh, that's supposed to be going up and down. It's my heart. My heart's not working. And the second that I thought that thought, I was back up on the ceiling again with the being next to me. And I again said, I really, really would like to go back into my life, please. And so right about that time, the neurosurgeon said to the orthopedic surgeon, too much time has passed. She's going to be brain dead. We need to do something. And then the orthopedic surgeon yelled, stand clear. And everybody backed away from the table. And he stepped 2 steps forward and swung his fist from behind his back over his head and pounded my chest. And I'd never seen that before. I didn't know what that was, but I watched my body react to it. My body kind of jerked when he hit me, but I didn't go back into it. And up on the ceiling, the being who was there next to me finally spoke to me. And I heard this beautiful voice that is just, it was so precious. And it said, but if you go back, you'll still be in your marriage. What will you do? And then I saw all these little film clips that just went flash, 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 flash. And it was all these incidents that had happened during the time I had been married to this person. And it was him hitting me, him pushing me, shoving me, kicking me, knocking me to the floor, pushing me up against the wall. All the things that he had done were all shown to me. And I'd been trying to forgive, forget, help him get into a better mode, help him to get rid of his anger, help him in any way I could. And it just wasn't working. So I saw all those little film clips, and then I actually took the few moments to review all of the things that I had done to try to help him change. And once I did the review, then I realized he couldn't change. There was nothing more for me to be able to do to help him. And then I said to the being, to God, I said, if you let me go back, I promise you I'll get strong enough to leave him. And the second I said the word him, the doctor did a second blow to my chest. And that was probably only seconds after the first one, but up there on the ceiling, it seemed like minutes. And that second blow restarted my heart, and I shut my eyes up on the ceiling, and I opened my eyes, and I had the oxygen mask on my face. And of course, I'd never heard of a near-death experience. I had no idea that they exist. I had never meditated, never anything. And I then spoke into the oxygen mask, and the doctor was only an arm's length away from me. And I looked at him, I said, what just happened? And the nurse leaned over me and said, stop, don't talk. We need to stabilize you. And so for 20 minutes, whatever they did stabilized me. Then they finally took the oxygen mask off. Everyone was waiting to see what I was going to say. And I said, what just happened? I was up on the ceiling and I could see and hear everything. And the neurosurgeon went, oh, brother. And that made me completely disclose what everyone in the room had said and done during the time that I was out of my body. And I pointed at people and just disclosed what they had said or done, and it just freaked everyone out. But the neurosurgeon was the most freaked out. He clenched his fist, pulled him up next to his body, and looked really angry. And he said, "I am not going to stand here and listen to this." And he went storming out of the room. Well, then the orthopedic surgeon and everyone else stayed, and the orthopedic surgeon took my hand and was very gentle, and he said, "That's amazing. Tell me about how you felt. What did it feel like? Tell me again what you saw and heard. That is just amazing." And so he was very open to it. And he, years later, when I saw him again, told me, "Barbara, that was a very special experience for me. And I wish that I could travel and talk with you and validate your experience, but I'd lose my medical license. All my colleagues and my patients would probably walk away." So he said, "You keep on talking about it, Barbara, and you keep on giving that gift away." So I think that was just so beautiful. And what ended up happening was they moved me up to my room. They did the surgery the next day. No one could talk to me about it. It was obviously possible lawsuit, which I never did sue anyone, but they were afraid for that. So no one spoke to me until I left the hospital. And then for years, I kept it inside myself. After I told that ex-husband and he, poo-pooed it, then I was like, okay, I'm not going to tell anybody else. So I ended up leaving the ex-husband, getting away safely, and I ended up marrying my wonderful, sweet husband that I have now, 7 feet tall. And he believed me completely when I told him all about it. And then still, I kept it to myself. We both worked at the university here in Santa Barbara, and I didn't want people to think I was weird. And so I kept it to myself for years until I ended up going to the IANDS meeting, the IANDS conference, and then ended up having other issues that happened in my life that allowed me to feel like, okay, I was given an award as the top businesswoman of the year for Santa Barbara. I was given a secret clearance for the Department of Defense previously, and I was given an award at the university for being an unsung heroine for all of the volunteer work I did around town. And so all of these things where I kept on getting awards, not necessarily because I felt like I needed them, but because I think they knew that I needed them to be able to get to the point where, okay, I'm in Santa Barbara. I'm going to talk about this, and I'm going to give this gift away just openly. So after that conference in 2009, I opened up my IANDS group here in Santa Barbara at 2011, and I've been doing it ever since then. And every month we bring an experiencer here to talk about their experience and give people that gift.
It's so beautiful. It's so beautiful. And Vinney, I'll let you and Barbara go back and forth, and me and Lynn will step away, but I am truly touched. So
Thank you.
Barbara, when you did first start sharing it, what was your fear? What was your initial fear of sharing it?
Well, because I lived in Santa Barbara and because my husband was kind of famous here for his basketball career, I was afraid that people would discredit me and it would be negative for him and my family, for my children. Plus, my daughter was just young and it was her father I was talking about. So I was concerned that it would hurt her heart. But as she got older, by the time that I did start talking about it, we had had conversations and she knew who her father was.
Yeah,
And she realized I was telling the truth and that it was something that I needed to talk about. And so I came out of the closet with it.
it's a moment for every experiencer that, we all hold it inside for a while. There's always that initial audience, the first audience, and how they receive it depends on how we will go with our experience after that. I remember sharing mine with a neurologist who convinced me it was just a chemical process of confusion or hallucination. And, you're familiar with my experience. So, as months later, I found out that if it was a hallucination, I just so happened to hallucinate the very ancestor that would have I didn't know, so it's one of those things where the first audience you share it with, it kind of dictates where you go with it. I was the same. I was very much afraid that the world was going to judge me, ostracize me. But there was times, at least for me, where someone would be facing death themselves, or they had just lost a loved one or a child. And I would feel everything inside me tell me I need to go just share what my experience was with them. And it was getting more comfortable with that year after year because it felt like it was making a big difference for them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's why the IANDS group exists. And that's why my IANDS group exists. And it feels like when I tell people about it, it feels like I'm gifting them something that maybe they don't need right then, but they are going to face a death with a loved one, or they are going to face death themselves. And I'm hoping that that somehow is planting a seed that helps them through that process of either grief or the facing of death. And that is why I continue to talk about it. And I even had little pins made that say NDE on them, and I give them away to all the experiencers so they can wear them on their collar. And so whenever I wear mine, I can be in the grocery store line or anywhere, and people will go, "What does your NDE pin mean?" And I'll go, "That means near-death experience." And I had one, and actually had two. And so, and they'll go, "Oh my gosh, my aunt had one, my sister had one, my brother had one, my cousin had one." And then I end up hearing their story. And it's really a connection. There's so many people out there that don't talk about it, but you can't go around with an NDE on your forehead, but you can go around with this NDE pin on your collar. And I give those away all the time. And I feel that that's really helping who knows who out there that sees that and starts to talk to the person who's had a near-death experience. And I really feel that that's a gift that we need to keep giving away.
Well, 1 to 2 people out of every 10 around us every day in the United States, anyway, have had some type of either NDE or STE, spiritually transformative experience. Now, Barbara, what was your favorite after effect from your experience?
So mine is my intuition. And I don't think that intuition is coming from me. I think that's the connection that I have with the other side that's permanent. And I've had the most amazing experiences that have just blown people's minds with my intuition capacity. And I'm not a medium. I don't want to be someone who is a medium. That's fine for everybody out there, but it's not me. So I just love it when something happens and I know that, like, I've even saved our lives by knowing what was going to happen and being helped by the other side. So my husband is always like, "Wow." So that's my favorite part of it completely.
What I really love about your story, being a little bit of an insider with you, I love how you heard from Spirit you were supposed to start a business. You went to a bank without any education on what you should bring. You're following Spirit blindly. Spirit says, go in this bank, ask for a loan. And you go in and they turn you down.
The first person did.
The first person. But as you're walking out, Spirit says what?
"You are giving up too easily. You need to go back and ask someone else." And so
you get the second person, and sure enough, it sets you up with this great loan, this great business, this great idea that you had.
Yep.
It really networked you even further into the community of Santa Barbara.
Yes.
It was kind of a little social hub of the area. Now, it was a scrapbooking store, right?
Yes, yes. And I had not even scrapbooked other than one little fun Friday night with a girlfriend that she took me to one of those home scrapbooking groups. And I had a fun time, but I have 5 kids and there's working full time, 5 kids, all the other things that I was volunteering to do. I had no time to scrapbook and sit down and do that. And I had no ability to do that. So I literally, when I had that voice, you will have a scrapbook store. I questioned it and looked up at the ceiling and went, God, are you talking to me? Because I don't scrapbook and I don't know anything about retail stores. I work in development, fundraising for the university. I don't do that. And, it was amazing how it then, in that very same day, 6 hours later, I had the loan for the store and I had permission from my husband. He immediately said yes. And I immediately gave notice to my university boss to leave 2 weeks later. And I opened the store 3 months after that. And 3 months after I opened the store, I was named Businesswoman of the Year for Santa Barbara. I can see how it was all planned to put that, effort into my life to make me see that, okay, you're somebody that can talk about this and people aren't going to judge you. So that's
what I
really
love
cool.
too is with all of that, God was preparing you with this idea of the scrapbook store.
Yep.
And as we all know, because there's not a scrapbook store on every corner anymore. There was at
No.
one time, though. There was
Yes,
a lot of them at
definitely.
one
It was a
time.
big deal for a while.
And so it was kind of one of these trends. And as it was working through that trend, God had an additional step there. And all the things you were doing and learning as this business owner was getting you ready to run this amazing chapter of IANDS.
Thank you.
And
Yeah,
it was like as you closed the scrapbook chapter, you opened the chapter of IANDS.
Same month. Yeah, closed the store and got to the conference that August 2009. And then actually I opened the IANDS group in 2011 because it took me a little while to get all the details together and find the place to be able to have it at and, all the different stuff. So yeah, it did take me a little bit of time to get the IANDS group open, but it was just, I got connected to IANDS in the same month that I stopped my store. I realized that was what I was supposed to move forward with. So,
and I love that your business got you plugged into the community so well that you knew church leaders, government leaders, city officials. You knew so many, and not just from working at the university, which that actually plugged you in quite a bit well as well.
Yeah. It was pretty amazing. And it's just the neat, there's another neat story that I have to tell too, is that when I hear from the other side, I realize, it's not my intuition. It is the other side helping me. And I actually had this amazing experience I think I told you about that saved victors in my life and saved a police officer's life and saved a truck driver's life when a truck had overturned north of Santa Barbara. And I was warned miles ahead of time that there was danger up ahead. And I actually heard a little voice that told me, danger, big impact ahead, danger, big impact. And it allowed me to react and have Victor, who was driving, slow down to the point where when we got to the actual accident, which we had no idea was up there ahead, we ended up not running into the bottom of the cab of the truck that had tipped over on its side, big semi truck. We didn't blow it up because that's where the gas tanks are. We were able to very quietly and easily go around the front of the truck, and they had closed the freeway behind us. We didn't know that the truck was up there. We didn't know anything was going on, but I got warned, and that saved our lives and the other two people's lives that would have been killed if we'd run into that truck. And I am so grateful for the other side, coming through and talking to me and telling me things that I need to know that help me and help others. And it just is such a blessing to have that in my life. I love my open door to the other side. I'll keep it open forever.
Forever, right? You don't want it to close. What advice would you give to somebody who's new to their intuition or they've yet to recognize they have it?
Well, I would say that the other side talks to you through your intuition. So when you feel something that comes through like, oh, maybe I shouldn't go down that alleyway, I'm feeling funny about that, listen to that and do what you feel you're getting, a nudge to do, because that isn't you guessing that. it is the other side. Someone from the other side is trying to help you with making a decision that's going to help you through something. And, a lot of people ignored that, and then they have repercussions for it. I do feel that there's lots of lessons in our lives that we're supposed to have in our lives that help us grow and help us experience something that will contribute to us or others. But I think that, listening to the other side's intuition moments are really important, and really feeling like talking to them and talking to the other side and talking to God and saying, my door is open for you, and you can talk to me anytime you want to, and understand that that's real. That's not goofball stuff. It is honest and real to be able to connect with the other side. And it's not, there's been so many times that it's happened where I've blown people away that it's like, wow.
Yeah,
So,
it's like you have to have that intention first, and start monitoring your thoughts. Recognize your squirrel moments. That's what I call it. Where your thoughts are going along and all of a sudden, bam, something just gets dropped right in the middle of the road of your thought.
right.
And that's one of the first recognition that it's some kind of outside energy.
Yes.
And then over time, you get used to filtering that and figuring out, is this me? Is it intuition? Is it high intuition, low intuition? Because we actually have a broad spectrum of intuition. Now, we talked about your favorite part. What's your least favorite after effect from your experience?
I don't think I have one. They've done a lot of research on the after effects. And one of my other favorite ones, actually, is that they say that we don't age the same as other people do. So I still have 20/20 vision, and my hair is still my red. I have not dyed it, and I'm 68 years old. So I'm happy camper about all the positives that the near-death experience have given me. I can't think of anything that I feel is negative from the whole experience. It has given me so many gifts in my life that it is just beyond awesome. And I, don't want people to try to go out and get a near-death experience, but I think they have also done the research that if you read about them and you learn about them, that you gain the same after effects or similar after effects as the experiencers do. So you don't actually have to have one to gain that intuition and to gain the different after effects that you've got. So I think that's important for people to know.
I think that's a kind of a theme too. When you go to the IANDS conference, you see so many people, who look like they're in their 60s and 70s, and then some of them are in their 80s and 90s.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
they're so leaning into their light that they are not aging the same. Absolutely.
Yep. That's exactly right. Yep. And the life that comes after the near-death experience. I mean, it took me a while to, assimilate it, but once it was assimilated, no fear of death. I literally attacked 4 gang members downtown on State Street in Santa Barbara when they were stabbing to death a 19-year-old boy. And I had no fear in my attack of them. No one else was doing a darn thing about it, other than maybe picking up their phone and calling the police, which were going to take minutes to get there, and the boy would have been dead. But I jumped out of my car, ran over there, grabbed the guys, and looked really mean and went, "Rah, rah, rah, rah." And then they got up. They were scared of me, and they got up and ran away. And I took the 19-year-old boy to the hospital and saved his life. So,
Wow.
yeah, there's no fear of death in
Because your
me at all.
intuition was probably leading you pretty strong on that too.
Yes,
I had an
exactly.
experience in DC that we were going to go downtown, while we were there for IANDS. We went downtown for one of the last meals.
Uh-huh.
And I think it was on Labor Day. It was like one of the last days we were there. And there was a little bit of an altercation with 2 gentlemen and 2 guns. And
Oh,
they were sticking up some people and robbing them. And I felt the strongest power in me come alive. And I just started walking towards them really fast, open-eyed, staring at them with a dead stare, and just walking towards them with that
power.
confident light and power. And I was feeling it from spirit.
Yes.
And of course, no fear of death.
Right.
And as I did that, one guy drops the bag. The other guy's like, he's a cop. And they both went running. And it was just weird. People, when it happened, though, they all were ducking down and hiding behind potted plants. And, one lady was like hiding behind a street sign, which that wasn't going to work so well for her.
No.
But it's just funny how, there's different after effects. One after effect that I've had a little bit of a hard time with is once spirit tells you should be doing something, if you don't do it, your body starts to suffer.
Oh, really?
For me, yeah.
Yeah, I think
So
I haven't had that.
I have to do almost everything that they're prompting me to do for the greater purpose anyway.
Yes.
Now with your intuition, has it gotten stronger over the years, or has it been pretty consistent?
It's been pretty consistent. And even prior to my age 31 near-death experience, I had it all through my childhood and my teen years too. So there were times when, I blew friends away. Actually, one time I ended up knowing something was going to happen, and the girls that I were with, one of them ended up telling people at my high school and calling me a witch. And I had to combat that situation, and that was really hard for me. It was embarrassing and hard for me because I knew something was going to happen and then it happened, I was actually like, why would you be mad at me for that? Why would you call me a witch and act meanly? But it happened and it was hard. So
it's like that surgeon that heard you confirming that you actually were in that room. It was irrefutable that you were there. You were describing the events exactly how they happened.
Yeah.
And see, his ego logic had no place for that because he had built this, house of cards or paradigm that doesn't happen.
Exactly.
That once the consciousness is gone, it's gone. And maybe he was an agnostic or an atheist or maybe even didn't believe there was such thing as a soul. And so when you were bringing all this evidence, his brain had no place for that evidence. And so he just rejected it. And I've had that happen. That happen.
Yeah. And I even, years later, many years later, I even had, I dropped off a bottle of wine to his office with a card that said, I know you remember the incident that happened with me, and I would love to talk with you about it, maybe at lunchtime or something. If you'd like to, go with me to have lunch, I'd love to speak with you about it. And I got no response whatsoever. So he's never going to open up to what happened in that situation. And I don't know if he's had it in other situations too, but he's just such an extremely closed person. He will not open up. But the other doctor, he did, was kind and did open up, and I gave him a bottle of wine too.
And what a big difference that made to have a receiving audience versus a rejection audience.
Exactly.
I think heaven sent the other doctor there because there were some important lessons those medical technicians were learning that day, that you don't let your conversations be more important than the life that's in your hands.
Right.
And that's a really important lesson,
Yes, absolutely. And what was amazing for me was that the hospital here in Santa Barbara ended up, the infectious disease specialist absolutely loves my group. And he ended up contacting me and asking me to do a grand rounds talk in front of doctors and nurses. And after I did that with John Hagen, who wrote The Science of Near-Death Experiences, the two of us were there for grand rounds. That doctor told me that was the largest attendance for any grand rounds talk that they'd ever had. There were like 60 doctors and 40 nurses that showed up to hear John Hagen and I talk about my near-death experience and near-death experiences in general. So we're hoping that planted a lot of seeds within the medical community in Santa Barbara. So
well, it's funny that the logic mind would try to shut out something like this when we know that energy is eternal. We know it is, right? It just changes from form to form to form. And whatever the energy is that keeps these bodies alive is got to be soul, and has been that, following that train of mind, that means that the soul has been around forever.
This was such a great conversation with Barbara. I feel like truly she's already a friend. Her story was absolutely incredible, and it was such an honor to have her on the podcast today. If you are interested in hearing the rest of this conversation, this was only part 1 of 2. Be sure to catch part 2 of this conversation with Barbara Bartolome.
Thank you for joining us on the Living God's Light podcast. You can help keep the show going through getting merch at livinggodslight.com or contributing what you think the show is worth on our website or by going through Patreon. Thank you for sharing your light with the world. You are making a difference, and we love you.